Hello there, Croeso and welcome. I'm Shadow Lemmax, and here I'm playing Slay the Spire, one of the PlayStation Plus games we were given for April. And it is a roguelike game that's based around building a deck of cards, which you will use to attack and kill your enemies and move forward in the game. It said it's a roguelike, so every run through the game will play a little differently, and it'll always be a little random for the cards you get and other things, relics and potions as well. But we'll go into that when I do a quick run through now. You got standard, which is what you'll go on to first, and it's just the basic game. There are 3 levels to go through to complete it. Actually, there's 4, but I haven't quite unlocked that yet, and it'll take a while just for you to do the 3 levels that are the standard Slay the Spire game. Got a daily challenge. These have unique modifiers, and everyone basically gets a chance to compete against each other who can set the highest score. And then you've got a custom game here where you can put your own modifiers on and make your own challenges. But standard is where you'll be starting. There are 4 characters, but the first one that you'll have unlocked is the Ironclad. Once you've completed a run with this character, when I say completed a run, it just means start a game and get to the point where you finish, either complete it or you die. Once you've done that, you'll get the Silent. Once you complete a run then with the Silent, you'll unlock the Defect. And then to unlock the final character, the Watcher, you actually have to complete the game, complete all 3 acts, while having all 3 characters unlocked. But you don't have to use all 3 characters. I completed the game with the Silent, really got on with how this character in particular works. But I'm going to go into the game with the Ironclad, who will be the first character you go into the game with if you're starting the game for the first time. When you first go in, you won't get this little act here. I'm not quite sure what this creature is. It looks like some sort of whale, but every time you start a new run after your first, he'll give you an option of things that you can choose that can either help you. You can either choose, so in this case I get 4 options, not always the same. I've got choose a card to obtain, enemies in the next 3 combats have 1 HP, lose 8 max HP, choose a rare card to obtain, lose my starting relic, which is the ability that this character has to heal 6 HP at the end of every match. I could lose that and obtain a random boss relic. Again, lots of chance here. You're not always going to get not potentially always going to get something you want or need. So I'm actually going to go with this. It only helps me for 3 combats, but it does ensure that I'll get through the first 3 rounds of fighting without having to take too much damage. So this is what you'll be starting with. This is the map. You pick your route and you go through until you get to the boss at the top here. Start off with 4 potential routes, and then once you're on a path you have to follow it all the way until you get to the splits, and then you can split direction. So certain play styles will need you to get to certain things, so it's good to plan out your route. You'll always start with fights here, then you've got an unknown. If you look at the legends here, unknown, you may encounter monsters, treasures, shops, or something entirely different. And these are usually ways to get quite unique powers. Get your merchants then. These are the shops. You can buy new cards, you can buy potions, relics, and you can even sell not sell, you can even get rid of cards from your deck. This is really, really useful. As you go later on into the game, you're going to want to start doing that because you don't want your deck of cards to get too big, because it'll then get harder to find the cards you need to do damage, block, and so on, as you'll see in a minute. Treasure rooms, you can receive relics and golds. Rest stops, where you can heal or upgrade cards, but you only get the chance to do one. And then enemies and elite enemies. These are mini bosses that will give you good stuff when you beat them. At the top here is where you get your potion slots. You've got your money pouch with your gold, your health. These you can then go to your relics. So I currently have 2. The starting one at the end of combat, heal 6 HP. And then I've got this one now. Enemies in my first 3 combats will have 1 HP. And if I press L1, this is the deck I start with as the Ironclad. You always start with this deck, but the cards you find as you go forward will always be different. So we'll start here. We'll go through this one because I'll be able to go through the unknown rooms as well, show you sort of things you might find there. This is how the battle will look. The first 3 battles will go very swiftly because I only have to do 1 HP. The enemy only has 1 HP at the moment, so these are your cards. This is a starting deck. All I've got is attack cards and skill cards. Attack cards obviously do damage. See here. At the end of every round, you'll get a choice of gold or items you can pick, depending on if you've got the open slots, and you'll always get a card to add to your deck. So we'll see what we get here. So we get a skill card that adds a random attack into my hand and it costs 0. The numbers in the top left of the card are the energy value of the card, how much it costs to use. I think I will go with this. Flex. It's a card that gives you temporary strength, which ups your attacks, and you can go really heavily down that route with this character to do big damage in a single turn. So we went into that mystery place and it turns out it was a fight. So if you look at the bottom left, you'll see where it says 3 out of 3. That's the energy that I have, and if I use this strike, which will do 6 damage and cost me 1 energy, you'll see I've now got 2 energy to use for the rest of the turn. If you look above the enemy, you'll see a little sword with the number 7. That's showing the enemy's intention of what they're going to do on their go. In this case, they're going to attack me for 7 damage. And what you do is you put a block. So if I use this card, I now have 5 block on my character. This will last until my next go, and it will negate 5 points of damage. And there are strategies around building up a lot of block and using that to damage enemies, so you protect yourself while hurting the enemies. But because of the relic that I've got, only the first 3 combats I go into, the enemies will have 1 HP, and I can already see a certain tactic going where I picked flex in the first one, which increases my strength, and now I'm getting cards that strength affects directly. So I'm already starting to see a potential strategy to go for. You've also got, though, this card. As I said, you can build up a lot of block and then use other cards to do damage based on your block. This card would be really good for that. But I'm going to stick with the strategy I started with. And now we can see, if I press L1, my deck has now got these 2 cards. We'll do this last combat here. The last combat that's going to be easy for me. So we'll just attack and attack. As you can see, this has given me quite a good start. But now I've been given this card as well. 8 damage to all enemies. But this is a really interesting card and can do a lot of damage. But I think I will go with this move. So this is now going to be, I'm going to avoid this unknown room. Got a split in the paths, and I will fight this enemy here. This is going to be a battle that'll go on for a little bit. So this is my starting hand. I have 3 energy. In the bottom right corner, my discard pile. These are where the cards I use go. And in the bottom left, you'll see the draw pile, the cards that I can possibly draw. They won't come out in this order. And once the draw pile is empty, your discard pile then becomes your deck again, and you draw from there. So having a big deck means that it'll be difficult for you to find the cards you want, whereas having a small streamlined deck that does something specific, it'll be quite easy to find the cards you're after. We can see from the intention of the enemy, they plan to do 13 damage to me, but I don't have any blocks, so I have one option, and that is to go all out on attack. So I'll use that flex card that I picked up earlier to increase my strength, and you can see it's done increase the damage on all my moves. So I'll use 3 attacks to do as much damage as I can. I then press triangle to end my turn, and the cards that I use are now in my discard pile. The enemy has done his attack. Now this time I have enough blocks to be able to deal with the damage the enemy intends to deal to me. And it's always good to try and negate as much damage as possible, even if it means doing no damage on your turn. The enemies will not always do attacks. They'll do buffs and stuff themselves, and you can use those opportunities to attack. But in this case, I've used 2 defense cards to give myself 10 block, and I'll use my final energy to do some damage there. And when the enemy attacks now, he's going to attack into my block and just leave me with 2 block, but no damage. And as you can see, I'd used all the cards in my draw pile, and so my discard pile, which is now empty, has refreshed, and I'm randomly drawing cards again. And we can do enough damage here to vanquish this enemy before he can attack. And there we go. And then my relic kicked in, gained some HP, bit of gold. We'll see what we got this time. So this card, Rampage, is a card that gets stronger the more you use it in combat, but it'll always restart with dealing 8 damage, which will then increase by 5 every time you use the card. Again, if you've got a small deck and a few of these, you'll recycle them quite quickly, ramping up the amount of damage they do. And it is actually something I'm going to take. A very decent card. So now we got another fight here before it can split off. And we will try and get through these quite quickly. So I got 2 enemies and they both want to attack straight away. I can't put up enough block to deal with all the damage, but I'm gonna use the 1 block I've got to save myself a bit of HP. We then put some strength on and do 2 damage to all enemies. And I can't get rid of either of these. Ooh, I'd be 1 damage short of getting rid of the green blob on the right. But we'll just do as much as we can. I've used all my energy, so I'll just end my turn and let the enemies have their turn. And It doesn't look like I'm taking much damage, and it's quite incidental, but it builds up, and the only way to heal from campfires, that's also the only way to upgrade your cards. So we'll use some blocks there, get rid of you. I should have gone for the green blob, left it with 1 damage, HP, and then could have got rid of it that turn, leaving me only 1 enemy, but that's a little mistake. And now I've got 2 enemies to deal with. Hopefully, yeah, I've still got 2. See, into leaving that 1 enemy there and not thinking through my turns properly, I've now had to go through 2 combats where I'm taking 2 attacks. It's just not good. Rampage has come back and its damage has been increased enough to allow me to vanquish that enemy and that enemy. But that was actually a poor combat from me, and pretty much an example of what you shouldn't do in those situations. So here we go. The cards I get to choose: Blood for Blood, 4 energy, cost 1 less each time you lose HP this combat. As you can see, happens quite often. Clothesline, 12 damage applied to weak. A weak creature will deal 25% less damage with its attacks. Or Iron Weave, gain 5 block and deal 5 energy damage, sorry. I think I'll go with that one. It's a solid card that will help you in all situations. So now I've got 3 choices here, either an elite enemy, Bonfire, or an unknown. I'm actually going to go with the unknown because it's going to lead me straight into another Bonfire. And hopefully, yep, this is one of these random events that can happen. Some are bad, most are good, or pretty random though. So what's this one? The winged statue. Among the stone and boulders, you notice an intricate, large blue statue resembling a wing. You find gold spilling from its cracks. Maybe there is more inside. So I can pray and remove a card from my deck and lose 7 HP. I can destroy it and gain 50 to 80 gold. I can just leave. I think in this case, I'm going to destroy it and gain a random amount of gold. With all your might you hack away at the statue. It soon crumbles, revealing a pile of gold. Grab as much as you can and continue onwards. We go here to the Bonfire. I get a choice of 2 things I can do, but I can only do one of them. I can either heal for 30% of my max HP, so that will give me 24 health, or I can upgrade a card in my deck. I think in this instance I'm going to upgrade a card, and I'm going to go with Flex, my 0 card, and the first card I picked up. Now this is permanently upgraded for the rest of my run. We've got another. I'm going to avoid the elite boss here just so I can show a few more things. So before me lies an elaborate shrine to a forgotten spirit. And I only get 1 choice, leave or pray. 2 choices, sorry. And I will take that, remove a card from my deck. And I'm going to remove one of my... I'm actually going to remove one of my strikes. Or this. No, I'm going to remove Bash. It's a card I don't use that often. Costs 2 energy, doesn't do too much damage. Vulnerable can be useful, but I'd rather be using other attacks. So by removing this from my deck, I've lowered the number of cards I've got, and then I've lowered the number of chances of not getting the card I want. And that's what deck building games are about. It's a lot of random involved, but it's about reducing that chance. And then we got treasure here. This will give you a relic. This will always be random, and the relics will not always be useful for how you particularly want to play. So here we go, enemies with vulnerable takes. So I've just gotten rid of the card in my deck that puts vulnerable on enemies, and then right afterwards it gives me a relic where I deal more damage to vulnerable creatures, and this will be permanently with me for the rest of my run. There are ways that I could potentially remove it, but it's random whether I will get that chance. So you can see where the little randomness comes in. And we've got another fire here where I can rest, which I will do this time to give myself some more HP. And then we proceed. We got enemies and more unknowns, and you can see you can actually build a route where you don't have to fight enemies so often. And if you've got all the cards you want for your deck, you don't necessarily have to. All you really need to do is get to the end to fight the boss, to get to the next act. There are 3 acts, 3 bosses. Once you're done, you've completed the game. And what I'll show you now is me taking on the final stages of Act 3 with the Watcher. The Silent, sorry. The second character you unlock, just to show you a bit more advanced gameplay. So this is me coming up to fight the final boss of Act 3 with my character. I start off with a few innate cards in my hands. These allow me innate cards you always start with, and then there are power cards that put certain powers on me, so these will be permanent effects for the rest of the fight, and I won't get those cards back, so they're used, they don't go into my discard pile. And the tactic I've gone with this character is that I'm going to use lots of shivs, basically. These 0 cost cards that do a set amount of damage, and then all the cards that I've got built around about increasing the damage those shivs do. And then one of the cards I played right at the beginning of the game gives me block for every spell I use, including the 0 cost spells. So I'll be playing a lot of cards per turn. Pretty much all the cards in this deck either cost 1 or 0, and almost all the cards are meant to give me more shivs. I also use a card called Blur, so I can keep the block I gained across multiple turns to deal with the fact that I'm not that defensive, so enemies can kill me quite quickly. But by using Blur, I can hold on to my block going forward. I've only got a deck of 21 cards, and 3 of them are powers that I use straight as soon as I get them, so they essentially are cards that are out of my deck then for the rest of the fight. So I think I play with about 18 cards that are then repeating themselves over and over. And there we go, another power card to further increase the damage that I can do with these shivs. Got cards that give me block and shivs, and that's what pretty much my whole tactic is built around. So I'm just going to leave this now and let you see the rest of this final battle play out. I just want to say diolch and thank you for watching.